Gopijana Ballava Girivaradhare Gopijana Ballava Girivaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatiravanachare Yamunatiravanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopijana Ballava Girivaradhare Gopijana Ballava Girivaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatiravanachare Yamunatiravanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON's Vandracharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Shishi Radha Radhanath Ki Shri Giri Govardhan Ki Sankirtan Yagya Ki Shri Gaur Purnima Mahotsava Ki Gaur Premanande. All glories to the Assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 3, talks between Lord Shiva and Sati, verses 21 and 22. Is it? No, it's 20 and 21, excuse me, 20 and 21. I take it that 20 is not on the sheet. Yeah, okay. Right, so let me just read 20. Vyaktam tvam utkrishta gate prajapate priyatmajanam asisubru me mata tatapi manam napitu prapatsyase mad ashrayet ka pretapyate yata. Translation: My dear white-complexioned wife, it is clear that of the many daughters of Daksha, you are the pet. Yet you will not be honored at his house because of your being my wife. Rather, you will be sorry that you are connected with me. And there is a short purport here. Lord Shiva put forward the argument that even if Sati proposed to go alone without a husband, still she would not be received well because she was his wife. There was every chance of a catastrophe, even if she wanted to go alone. Therefore, Lord Shiva indirectly requested her not to go to her father's house. And verse 21. Papachamanena Hrida Turendriya Samridibi Purusha Bodhi Sakshinam Akalpa Esham Adirodham Anjasa Param Padam Dweshti Yatasura Harim Papachamanena Hridaturendriya Samriddhibi Purusha Buddhi Sakshinam Akalpa Esham Adirodham Anjasa Parampadam Dweshti Yatasura Harim Papachyamanena ridaturendriya Samriddhipi Purusha Buddhi Sakshinam Akalpa Esham Adirodam Anjasa Parampadam Dveshti Yatasuraharim Papachyamanena Ridatudendriya Samriddhipi Purusha Buddhi Sakshinam Akalpa Esham Adirodam Anjasa Parampadam Dveshti Yatasuraharim Pachamani Ridaturendriya Riddhipi Purusha Buddhi Sakshinam Akalpa Esham Adirodam Anjasa Ampadam Deshti Tasuraharim Ridatudendriya Papachamanena burning Hrida with a heart Atura Indriya who is distressed Samriddhipi by the pious reputation etc. Purusha Buddhi Sakshinam of those who are always absorbed in thought of the Supreme Lord. Akalpa, being unable, Esham, of those persons, adhirodham, to rise, anjasa, quickly, param, merely, padam, to the standard, dveshti, envy, yata, as much as, asura, the demons, harim, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation: one who is conducted by false ego and thus always distressed, both mentally and sensually, cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. Being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The real reason for the enmity between Lord Shiva and Daksha is explained here. Daksha was envious of Lord Shiva because of Shiva's high position as an incarnation of a quality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because Shiva was directly in contact with the Supersoul and was therefore honored and given a better sitting place than he. There were many other reasons also. Daksha, being materially puffed up, could not tolerate the high position of Lord Shiva, so his anger at Lord Shiva's not standing up in his presence was only the final manifestation of his envy. Lord Shiva is always in meditation and always perceives the Supersoul, as expressed here by the words Purusha Buddhi Sakshinam, the position of one whose intelligence is always absorbed in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is very great and cannot be imitated by anyone, especially an ordinary person. When Daksha entered the arena of Yajna, Lord Shiva was in meditation and might not have seen Daksha enter. But Daksha took the opportunity to curse him because Daksha had maintained an envious attitude towards Lord Shiva for a long time. Those who are actually self-realized see every individual body as a temple of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his Paramatma feature, is residing in everyone's body. When one offers respect to the body, it is not to the material body, but to the presence of the Supreme Lord. Thus, one who is always in meditation upon the Supreme Lord is always offering him obeisances. But since Daksha was not very elevated, he thought that obeisances were offered to the material body, and because Lord Shiva did not offer respect to his material body, Daksha became envious. Such persons, being unable to rise to the standard of self-realized souls like Lord Shiva, are always envious. The example given here is very suitable. Asuras, demons or atheists, are always envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They simply want to kill him. Even in this age, we find some so-called scholars commenting on Bhagavad Gita who are envious of Krishna. When Krishna says, Manmana bhava mad bhakta, Bhagavad Gita 1865, Always think of me. Become my devotee and surrender unto me. The so-called scholars comment that it is not to Krishna that we have to surrender. That is envy. The asuras or atheists, the demons, without reason or cause, are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, instead of offering respect to self-realized persons, foolish men who cannot approach the highest standard of self-realization are always envious, although there is no reason. Papachamanena hridatu rendriya samriddhi purusha buddhi sakshinam akalpa esham adirodham anjasa parampadam dveshti yatasura harim. One who is conducted by false ego and thus always distressed, both mentally and sensually, cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. Being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yes, well, this here the verse, and particularly Srila Prabhupada, in the purport, they're examining the background behind the whole situation, how the situation had developed to come to that point where Daksha started just criticizing and blaspheming and just becoming so horrible. In other words, it's a long story. It's not just that there they were, that sacrifice was about to begin. What was it? The Vajrapeya Yajna was just about to begin, and Daksha, who is the main sponsor and sponsor, I suppose, of the sacrifice that's being done for him under his at his request. So he walks in, and he is an important person. He's not just another one of the people who happens to be there. He is important. He's one of the leaders of the Prajapatis. So, to some reasonable degree, he is respectable. More respectable than some number of the people there. And so there was this thing, people at least started standing up and offering some pranams like that. But as we know, Lord Shiva didn't, and actually Lord Brahma didn't either. But many others did, maybe the majority, or all of them perhaps. So Daksha, as we know very well, got terribly disturbed, particularly about Lord Shiva. Lord Brahma, he didn't get disturbed about, because Lord Brahma is his father, and that's an obvious position of seniority. And what to speak of the fact that Lord Brahma is such a powerful, great controller of the universe. So Daksha did not react against Lord Brahma for not standing up. But Lord Shiva, as we know, he got terribly, terribly distressed. But it wasn't just that immediate situation. As it happened, Lord Shiva didn't stand up, and suddenly Shri Radha Radhanath, Shri Giri Govardhan, Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Gopanima Mahotsava ki jai. Yeah, it's not that just under the immediate circumstances, Daksha is feeling fine. He has no problem. But then he sees Lord Shiva's not standing up, and then he's got a problem. Big problem. It's not quite that simple, as Srila Prabhupada points out here, that Daksha had maintained envy towards Lord Shiva for a long time. It wasn't just due to the immediate circumstances, and other than that, there was no problem. It was something which had been burning in his heart, blazing in his heart for a long time. And we notice in the verse itself, this verse 21, right at the very beginning, Papachya mena hrida atura indriya. Papachya manena hrida, burning in his heart. It was burning in his heart. And that was actually the experience that he was having. Like there was physical heat. He was just so much obsessed and overwhelmed on an ongoing basis to all of this. Yeah, and there are all sorts of reasons. And Prabhupada mentions just two. Shiva's got a very high position because he's guna avatar. Plus, he's directly in contact with the super soul. These are two things. And people who were aware of that, people who knew that, the more advanced devotees and people who are aware of that, of his being so close to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they offered their respect, because that's when someone's an advanced devotee. Hey, Shanae. When someone's an advanced devotee, then people who are devotees, advanced or maybe not so advanced, but they're devotees, they offer respect. I remember one interesting little way it was put by His Holiness Dhanavir Maharaj many years ago. Someone offered him, bowed down and offered him respect and like that. And somehow or other, a little small discussion arose about what had happened and how it had happened. And Dhanavir Maharaj said, well, you know, after you've been around in this movement for a while, people just tend to offer you respect. So, yeah, it's a very nice way of putting it, but actually, particularly when devotees can see the evidence in terms of symptoms of different sorts in Krishna consciousness, then they are naturally, spontaneously, and happy to offer respect. So that was all going on with Lord Shiva. He was regularly being offered respect by good people, important people. But Daksha was not being offered that sort of respect. And this was going on for some period of time. So it's all just building up. Prabhupada makes the point that Daksha took the opportunity to curse him, Lord Shiva, because Daksha had maintained an envious attitude towards Lord Shiva for a long time. And it wasn't just those two reasons we mentioned. He's a guna avatar. He's in contact with the super soul, although they're very important. But there were many other reasons too why Daksha felt stimulated like that to act in an envious way, and how this had been building up, and the heat within his heart was just burning him. Yeah. So, and even, really, this can actually be a physical phenomenon. In fact, that's what happened with Sati, that her, not exactly envy, but certainly her distress, just a little further on, as we'll read in due course, her distress at the way her father treated her, in fact, when she did go, as predicted by Lord Shiva, the distress she felt was so overwhelming that her heart was literally burning, and that emotional burning, initially just emotional, sort of psychological type of burning, then transformed into actual burning. And her body, what's the term, self-immolated, or it just burst into flames. So it's not just some figurative type of, a literary embellishment to in a sort of metaphorical way, try to give some idea of how a person feels. It was actually like that. Even we read in Bhakti Ratnakara, there's a very nice description of how Srila Rupa Goswami at Tirkadamba, sometimes he would enter into the fire of separation from Srimati Radharani and Lord Krishna during discussions and at different times. He would enter into the fire, the blazing fire of separation. And the description is that he was in such a state, and there was one devotee sitting right next to him, and Rupa Goswami turned and breathed on him, the other devotee, and the other devotee's arm became blistered. So, yeah. So the connection between the subtle body and the physical, the gross body, no, it's there. And sometimes, like, for example, when people get frightened, just ordinary people, not devotees or anyone special, just ordinary people. Sometimes when they get frightened enough, they start shivering. We've all heard about that. I don't know, maybe some of us have experienced it. But these types of things happen sometimes. When people worry too much, they're in too much anxiety, then they get, what do you call them? Ulcers. They get ulcers from anxiety. Yeah. So Daksha, he's burning papachamena. He's burning papachamena hrida atura indriya. He's distressed by this burning within his heart of envy, dveshti. Prabhupada translates dveshti as envy. You know, oftentimes it's just translated as hatred. So, yes, this is not good. Envy, lust, anger, greed, envy, pride, arrogance. These are 6 of the classic demoniac, at least materialistic, and one can say demoniac attitudes which keep people caught up in material existence and just don't let them even start to get out of material existence. So we as devotees, we certainly have to be very careful to, as much as possible, completely avoid these things. Lust, anger, greed, and here envy. It's such a nasty thing. An envious person causes pain to others, but an envious person causes pain to themselves. Ultimately, it comes back on themselves. So such a person who's really, you could say, obsessed with these things, finds himself or herself always in this blazing fire of different types of anxieties and pains of different types, but they all boil down to a state of deep disturbance. And this is what happens, as the verse itself explains very nicely at the beginning of the verse. One who is conducted by false ego and thus is always distressed, both mentally and sensually. In material life, of course, lust as the sort of first, or one of the first, but in so many cases the first fault which is there. We know in Bhagavad Gita how Lord Krishna explains you could say, the sort of evolution, the development of the fall down of the conditioned soul in chapter 2, verses 62 and 63. Jayato vishayan pumsa sangasteshu bhajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodo vijayate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. Krodha bhavati samoha, samohat smriti vibrama, smriti brahmshad buddhi nasho, buddhi nashat pranashyati. From anger, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So it's a type of evolution, the development of the conditioned nature and the fall down of the conditioned soul due to the development of their conditioned state. One thing leads to another. And of course, in these two verses here, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verses 62 and 63, envy as such is not exactly mentioned, but it's definitely part of the process. It's there that, as verse 62 mentions, a person contemplates looking around at the opportunities for sense gratitude, well, looking around at this world, which to that sort of person means the different opportunities and facilities for sense enjoyment. So, and then becoming attached, and then acting on the attachment in order to get something supposedly enjoyable. But then what happens is, of course, the materialistic people think that from lust, in this context, lust means actually acting on it. Before that, there's attachment, which is not exactly quite acting on it and doing it. But here now, lust develops and the person does it, whatever it is. And of course, in material life, people think that now I'm acting on my lust. And now what comes? Happiness, satisfaction, all these types of things. This is the whole idea, or an extremely important part of the whole idea. Get your, whatever is the object of your lust, and go for it, and then comes happiness and satisfaction. But Krishna says anger comes. So along with the anger comes envy too, because the person, even before, when they're just attached and they're just interested, they're very interested in getting whatever they feel is enjoyable, but they become envious of those who have more of it or who already have it. And when they then try to enjoy and fail, they become envious of those people who apparently are more successful at enjoying. So envy is interwoven in the fabric of this whole idea of the fall down of the conditioned soul. Fall down, at least in the sense of falling down from the human species into lower species. They're already fallen, of course, in a general sense, just being in the material world. But now, in this situation, they go down into lower species, and that's just most terrible disaster. So, yeah, and the thing is, as the verse says, one who is conducted by false ego, identifying with the body, the material body. This is me, I am, whatever the body is, and then therefore seeing, no, this is me, therefore I have to get as much enjoyment for me, meaning the body, and trying hard for that. So this is false ego, but as we were discussing a little yesterday, this is all going on under false ego. It's all going on under the three modes of material nature. ignorance, passion, and goodness. And when you're in passion, well, Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita later on explains how these modes are always fluctuating. One is predominant, then it loses its dominance, and another one becomes dominant, and then it loses its dominance, and then another one becomes dominant, and it's always going on like that. And therefore the modes, in and of themselves, the modes are not stable. The modes are not stable. In fact, Lord Krishna, the way he puts it, is that there is a competition between the modes. It's like there's a competition, that someone is more in goodness, they're feeling clear, more clear-headed and more peaceful, like that. But then ignorance tries to push in, and goodness for the time being gets kind of sidelined, and ignorance becomes predominant, and then the person, from being clear-headed and peaceful, the person becomes, really ignorant, really stupid, making stupid decisions and thinking of stupid things, and becomes really dull-headed. But it's the same person is going through, is undergoing these changes of the modes. And then passion becomes prominent and overcomes ignorance for the time being, and the person gets really enthusiastic and wants to do this and do that for sense gratification. Welcome to the material world. This is how it works. And when a person is under the modes, then as the modes go, the person goes, and they cannot stop themselves. And as a result, even though sometimes they're a little more peaceful and something like that, but inevitably and unavoidably, they become disturbed. Yes. And the more one is just under the control of these things, then one comes to the point, as is stated here, always distressed, always in a state of distress. It's just a matter, it's not a matter of are you distressed or are you not? It's just a matter of what sort of distress. This sort of distress, and then it's replaced by another sort of distress, and then it's replaced by another sort of distress. So for people in material life, it's really just a matter of what sort of distress do you like? Or not like, but what sort of distress are you in? That's all. And Daksha, he is just a prime example, unfortunately. But of course, it's very illustrative for us. It's really educational for us to not get into such a condition, because the modes are all around us in this material world. The modes are just all around us, and even you could say the modes are in us. But depending on how we apply ourselves in Krishna consciousness, we'll be to a greater or lesser degree independent of the influence of the modes. Yes. So this is very important for devotees, because sometimes the modes and Maya Devi, the queen of the modes, so expert in making something material look attractive, even to a devotee. Material life or some aspect of it suddenly looks attractive, and one is attracted to start contemplating it. This is what Lord Krishna says, that by contemplating, one develops attachment, and then lust, one acts upon it. So Maya is always testing the devotees, the aspiring devotees. Like all of the residents of the Shishi Radha Radhanath temple of understanding and devotion and Krishna consciousness. That's Maya's business, to test and keep testing. And after testing, test again. Just like in school, it's just the way it works. There are tests, and then there are more tests. And the idea, at least, is through that sort of pressure, it makes the person, the student, more serious, and then they become better educated. Otherwise, they'd probably get into the mode of ignorance more. So in Krishna consciousness, it's like that also. Maya Devi, through the modes, Maya Devi is always testing the devotees. And progress in Krishna consciousness means or includes remaining fixed in our activities and our attitudes, our consciousness of serving Krishna and following, applying the process of devotional service. So this we have to do, otherwise sooner or later fall down will come. Daksha, he is just, he's a demigod, but he's in a fallen condition. And it can happen to us that if we give in to these impulses from the modes, then we can get into great difficulty without great difficulty very easily. Until you actually become advanced, like Lord Shiva is so advanced. So he is not affected by this very drastic criticism that was aimed at him. Really completely unaffected. So Prabhupada explains that when you reach that point, you've passed the tests and passed the tests on, and just become more and more absorbed in the nectar of devotional service, then eventually Maya Devi herself will come and offer her obeisances to you and congratulate you for passing the final test. Hare Krishna. Any comment or question?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. How to deal with the tendency to develop envy for devotees? Like, we're living in an ashram or in the society of devotees, and we may see another devotee that's advancing nicely, becoming self-realized, and getting a lot of respect and honor. And for a neophyte, that may seem a little upsetting in some ways. It can happen. And sometimes the tendency, the response may be, well, better I don't be with the devotees to avoid the tendency of developing envy for advanced devotees. So how should we deal with that situation?
Well, the last little bit you just mentioned about a devotee may think I should stay away to avoid becoming envious. that is tamagun. That is tamagun. It's the attack of the mode of ignorance. And it's impersonalism. It's, an aspect of impersonalism. So, but what to do when you see that other devotees are advancing, because other devotees are advancing. Definitely some other devotees are definitely advancing. And, on one hand, we shouldn't be envious, of course, but on the other hand, I was just listening, when was it? Yesterday? I think yesterday, Srila Prabhupada was saying that was it the reading yesterday morning? Anyway, I forget exactly. But Prabhupada was saying that as you had become a more advanced devotee, then the more advanced devotees think that actually, I'm not a devotee. I'm not a devotee. Yeah. But if you start, in other words, having a very humble perspective on themselves, but the problem that can be there with having a humble perspective on yourself, if that humility becomes contaminated by the modes of nature, is that instead of in a humble way appreciating the advancement of another devotee, then you may become envious, or you may become defeatist and feel, I can't do this, and give up, or something like, there are different variations which are possible, when contaminated humility is there. But a very good thing, at least having read, but in my experience, is when we observe the other devotees, don't just observe them in relation to me. So if someone's more advanced than to me in my contaminated state, that means, that's not good. Whereas if one devotee is not doing so well, then to me, from my contaminated position, I feel that's good. That sort of thing. But a nice thing to do, which helps, is first of all, one should try to learn the 26 qualities of a devotee. And when you're observing the other devotees, don't just try to observe them, because it's such a typical thing in material life. You evaluate other people in relation to yourself, and not just in and of themselves. So try to see how the devotees actually have and are displaying from time to time the qualities of a devotee, and appreciate it, and try to observe how they're manifesting different of the qualities, and then try to follow in their footsteps and try to do something similar yourself. Yeah. Of course, the foundation for all these, for like self-improvement and getting free from negative qualities, the foundation is always to really try to chant attentively. Without that, attempts like what I mentioned, they'll tend to just be mental and not be so deep. But if we really make an effort to chant nicely, then try to appreciate the other devotees, and in an analytical way try to understand or perceive and understand the different qualities they actually have, and then try to appreciate them like that and try and follow in their footsteps, it's nice. Because this whole I, me, and mine, aham, mameti, that's material life. That's material life. That's a suggestion. What do you think? Interesting. Jai Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is, interaction with devotees, if you receive malicious behavior towards you, and I resorted to keeping away, especially during prasad and things like that. You mentioned that would be tamagund. Is that real?
Oh, tamas. Yeah, that's what we said. Yeah, it's more like tamas. If you're being criticized, well, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, "He who flatters me is my enemy. He who criticizes me is my friend." Yeah. So, we've mentioned, as a devotee really develops humility, then they start, by Krishna's mercy, to perceive that, oh, I have this fault and that fault and another fault. That this is just, it's reality that I actually have these faults. And, because we're all sort of, well, I don't know, but we may tend to be actors and try to not display our faults too much. Or, devotees may just not notice our faults so much. So when someone criticizes you and you understand, this person can see something that's wrong with me, but not that much. They're not really seeing what a dog I am, actually. So then you can always thank them and tell them, listen, you don't know how bad I am. You are practically praising me. Yeah. So, anyway, that's some thought on the subject. But just keeping away, it's really not very good. We should try, if we're criticized, we should try to learn from the criticisms. Because as I was also listening just the other day, or maybe even yesterday or the day before, Chanaka Pandit says, you can take gold from a dirty place. So a devotee may criticize you, and maybe it's unfair, in a sort of on the surface type of level. Maybe it's just they're being envious. But you can take gold from a dirty place. So there's probably some value in it. They've probably perceived something, even though, they may distort it because of their envious attitude. Like, the very famous story of when Prabhupada had, a stroke or a mild, or a heart attack in New York. And it was, what day? It was a holiday, Memorial Day or something. They couldn't get a doctor. And Prabhupada was obviously really sick. But they got a doctor eventually, but he was drunk. And the doctor sort of, kind of examined Prabhupada and said, he just needs more exercise. And it was a lot of nonsense. I mean, in general, he didn't pick up that it's a heart attack. That's extremely serious. He just needs some more exercise. But Prabhupada accepted that, and, after he recovered, I think we all know, he had such a program every day of morning walk. And it wasn't just a little stroll around, It was exercise. So you can take gold from a dirty place. So if a devotee is criticizing you, rather than just the spontaneous reaction that, no, don't be nasty, all that sort of thing. Rather, first one should consider, what can I learn? Because there's almost inevitably something you can learn for your betterment, your improvement as a devotee. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Srila Gurudev. So Lord Shiva, he was in like a obligatory service kind of at the yagya, but he was kind of unaffected by certain qualities of envy and just the different qualities that were around him. A lot of the people there were not necessarily spiritual. When we're in like situations where it's like a necessary service or we're doing the needful and we're around people that we can't necessarily get away from, and we see some of like negative qualities coming or some things happening that are not favorable, how can we imbibe this quality of becoming unaffected?
That we're sort of picking up those.
How can we avoid,
Yeah. Well, through the vaccination process of good chanting, that's a good start. But, when we're associating with non-devotees, say particularly with non-devotees, then the nature of the relationship should be as much as possible that we are giving and they are receiving, not that they are giving and we are receiving, in terms of like the discussion and the exchanges. Yeah, when it's non-devotees particularly, we should be trying to preach to them and interest them in Krishna consciousness. And you might have to sort of entertain their usually kind of not very good ideas a little bit, but really keep it to a minimum, and the maximum is that you're giving them Krishna consciousness, and then you move on to the next one. But otherwise, if it's amongst devotees, and it's, not impossible for something like that to happen sometimes, then, if you're in the company of a devotee or even some devotees who are like that, they've got an envious, negative side to them, then, and if you're unable to help them to stop, then best to avoid them and offer respects from a distance. Offer respect because they're devotees, but offer respect from a distance. It's tied into what, connected to what Segi was saying. But, if we're talking about like the general orientation of people, not just some momentary thing, but they're really like that, and you can't correct them, then it's better to avoid them. But, if it's general if we're talking about general negativity, Segi was talking about criticism of oneself. So it's somewhat different from general negativity and general materialisticness. And So yeah, if people just sort of, devotees even are kind of generally on more materialistic and you can't help them, then it's best to avoid them. But if they're criticizing you, then first of all, try to learn. Take it as an educational opportunity provided by Krishna, because it's less likely that we will criticize ourselves, or it's less likely that we will see our faults than it is that other people may see them. Is that clear enough, sort of?
That's good.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.